Retrograde Mercury is the most commonly known astrological signature for Murphy's Law. If something can go wrong, it will, and is one of the first features intermediate astrology students learn about. Say it to a seasoned astrologer and you'll likely get an amused smile and some delightful stories about how things can get quite unexpectedly unhinged. Computers crash, software develops unexpected glitches, traffic jams ensue, telephone service snarls up, letters get lost in the mail, machinery breaks down, new projects fail. Ah, yes, the trickster Mercury is up to his old pranks again. In fact, at least 3 times a year for about 3 weeks each time Mercury has his way with us. First let's look at what Mercury retrograde is, and then look at what can be done about it. Those of a keen astronomical bent actually watch the planets each night as they travel through the zodiac. Mercury, which is only visible just before sunrise or just after sunset, travels in a forward direction most of the time. But 3 or 4 times a year, if you care to watch carefully, it appears to turn around and go backwards for about 3 weeks. Now Mercury really isn't going backwards. It's just an optical illusion based on the relative speeds and orbits of the Earth and Mercury around the Sun. Here's an easy example. Think of riding in a fast car on an expressway which is passing a slower moving car. The slower moving car appears to be moving backward, but it isn't really. It's just the relative speed and direction of the two cars gives that illusion. Retrograde Mercury is similar to that. The apparent backward motion of Mercury is called retrograde, and it has been known and studied in Western astrology for thousands of years. In general, the effect of Mercury retrograde is annoyance. Little things get snarled up and a low-grade frustration emerges. Anything involving communications, verbal activity, technology, short trips and journeys, primary education, and siblings can be affected. While Mercury retrograde usually is in the minor irritant category, every now and then a colossal screw-up can take place. For instance, the stock market crash of October 2008 took place while Mercury was retrograde, although in all fairness a large number of other much stronger astrological indicators were also present pointing to a major financial failure. Retrograde Mercury was more like the astrological straw which broke the camel's back. However, consider the Bush-Gore 2000 American presidential election in Florida. Now there's a classic colossal screw-up, and we can point our finger directly at Mercury retrograde. For reasons best known to the Americans, they chose to have their 2000 presidential election on the exact day when Mercury retrograde energy peaked, called stationary direct. Oh, my goodness. In the end, after weeks of wrangling and legal battles, George W. Bush was declared the winner. History now records what a mess he made of virtually everything he did for the next 8 years, a classic Mercury retrograde presidency. We astrologers, too, learned much from that Florida election. For instance, prior to the Florida election I had always thought a dimpled Chad was a good-looking man. One might think that after 8 years of George W. Bush, the Americans might show a bit of respect for what Mercury retrograde can do to an election. But, no, that's not how things are done in the United States. The 2012 presidential election went ahead as scheduled on November 6, the exact day when Mercury was stationary retrograde. Note 2 differences between the 2012 and the 2000 elections. The first is that in the 2000 election the Mercury retrograde was at the station which ended the retrograde, and in the 2012 election the Mercury retrograde will be at the station which begins the retrograde. Having made that distinction, which astrologers will relish thoroughly, for the rest of us just understand that both stations can snarl things up enormously. The beginning and ending stations are when the retrograde is the strongest. The other difference is that in 2000 there was no incumbent running for re-election. It was anyone's race. In 2012 we had President Obama running for re-election. He's a Leo and Leos love the imperial limelight. The Republicans nominated Mitt Romney, a Pisces, as their candidate. A fire sign, Leo, versus a water sign, Pisces. Either the fire is extinguished or the water boils away. In the end, Obama easily won his re-election. The water got boiled away, and with no rerun of the 2000 Bush score fiasco. Does that mean the U.S. is out of the woods? Not a chance. Mercury retrograde and its snarls and upsets have permeated Obama's second term of office. The U.S. president has had a 4-year-long Mercury retrograde to contend with. Ouch. Let's start with the still rancorous Congress and then move on to a shaky economy. That's enough right there, but the snarl-ups haven't stopped at that. How about Obamacare? Yes, politely one might call that a big snarl-up. Do we dare mention Edward Snowden? The Obama administration is using stronger language than snarl-up to describe Snowden and his revelations about NSA spying. Is there more to come? Of course. The fat lady hasn't sung yet. The only consolation in all of this is that the Americans will do their next election a bit differently. Mercury will not be retrograde when the U.S. goes to the polls in November 2016.